We are back live with our final interview of the evening with Dr. Jerome Corsi. He's an economist, of course, New York Times best-selling author of the Swift Boat book and more. And he wrote, "Where is the birth certificate?" And weeks before it was set to be released, the White House came out and produced a birth certificate that has been proven by many independent outfits, and we've covered that here, to be a childlike hoax. Now they've got a new second edition coming out soon saying, where is the real birth certificate? We're going to talk about that at the end of the interview with Dr. Jerome Corsi. But there's been some frightening developments. You know, Dr. Corsi, when Republicans were in power, wrote about the danger of continuity of government COG and this governor's council that Bush set up and Obama has continued. And now one of the heads of the governor's council in North Carolina, the governor, has come out and said maybe we should suspend elections. And we see Michael Moore saying capitalism is the problem. We see mainstream media having Roseanne Barr on, dressed up like Mao Zedong, saying we need to put people in re-education camps who are wealthy or / cut their heads off. And we're seeing more and more of these calls. We have reporters all over the country interviewing the Occupy Wall Street people. And they're not talking about stopping banker bailouts. They're not talking about going after the crony capitalist. No, they're calling for giant new taxes on the middle class to be paid as banker bailout or austerity money to people like Warren Buffett and George Soros. So because he's written so much about this and predicted so much of it, I want to cover these frightening developments first with Dr. Jerome Corsi and then get into Obama and his latest confirmed crimes with Fast and Furious. Because if they'll ship guns to Mexico and allow Sinaloa to ship cocaine in, the big drug cartel in the north of Mexico, they'd fake a birth certificate, wouldn't they? Dr. Corsi, great to have you here with us tonight.
Great to be back with you. Thanks, Alex.
Well, I just gave a long rundown preface. What do you want to tackle first?
Well, let's start with the call to cancel elections. I mean, I take this very seriously. I think that was a trial balloon. It was the idea of floating, the notion that elections can be called, and before the government does something like that, the government's going to telegraph it. You're going to test out the idea. And I've been writing, if you go back over 2 years, I pointed out that Obama and Odinga, the current prime minister in Kenya, when Obama was there in 2006 campaigning for Odinga, I had their internal documents from their campaign, which called for if Odinga lost the presidential election in December 2007, they were going to cause race riots, which they did. Luo, the Kikuyu race riots. Kikuyu were fighting each other, killing each other. And out of that, Obama and Odinga used the racial violence as a way for Odinga to become prime minister, co-head of state. And it was a position Kofi Annan, the United Nations, Obama was on the phone back and forth from the New Hampshire primary, the various primaries, talking to Odinga. It was completely strategized. So if Obama and Odinga had a dress rehearsal of using race riots in Kenya to get Odinga to be co-head of state, who's to say, put it past Obama from using a similar race riot scenario or other political violence to keep himself in power in 2012?
In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember you writing for, was it Human Events, WorldNet Daily at the time, it was like 2.5 years ago. You had the copy of the letterhead from Obama advising Odinga on this, and that was the really first time I heard somebody say, hey, they could use this strategy here in the United States. And now, more and more, they're all over the news. We posted an interview that a reporter did at the Occupy D.C. Wall Street crowd, and they were saying the state has the power. They need to force a takeover. They need to take the rich people's money. And then meanwhile, they're sourcing Warren Buffett and people who are promoting these middle-class tax increases to pay our money in new banker bailouts, literally to him and George Soros. I mean, these guys have got a lot of nerve.
Well, Obama has said very openly it'd be a lot easier to be president if he didn't have to worry about Congress. I mean, what kind of a telegraph statement is that? And these protesters showing up, the Wall Street protesters, this is a group that is an anarchy group. It's a far-left group. Got Michael Moore at the center of it. They're all out there to promote chaos. Obama is going to calculate, just like Odinga did, that if he can cause chaos, it's a way to stay in power. And the whole apparatus, I mean, Bush advanced it with the executive orders I wrote about during George W. Bush's term. If they can cause enough chaos, the president can declare a national emergency, can basically shut down Congress and take over as a dictator. And there's very little anybody can do about it. The powers are there.
And we have the super Congress set up that originates spending bills. In Europe, and I want you to speak to this, they admit it's a, quote, financial dictatorship through the bureaucracy where the Germans have got to pay the bills for all of these derivatives. I mean, we're seeing incredible things happen, and the system's just getting away with it. I want you to speak to that and then segue in to Fast and Furious, because you're always so well read. And we've done past reports here in the last week for viewers, but it's in the El Paso Times, Chicago Tribune, in federal court. The number 2 in the Sinaloa gang gets busted. The Mexican government ships him up here. He declares national security in the meeting and says, for 5 years, but under Obama in the last 3, it's accelerated, I'm allowed with the ATF to ship drugs into the country, and then they ship me firearms. And now we learned it's 2,000 in one sale directly to them. This isn't just letting guns walk. I mean, this is, now we learn it's shipping guns into Chicago, into Tampa. We learned there were almost fistfights at the ATF headquarters in, Phoenix, Arizona. I mean, all of this is in the documents, and this just shows a level of criminality. I mean, normally, there's been criminality under Nixon and Bush, and, I mean, it's always going under Clinton. But this is so naked. If we know about all of this, what's coming next?
Well, when I wrote about America for Sale, that was a key book to show how the globalists, and I identified the left and the right, Brzezinski and Kissinger, the economists calling for one world economic management through the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Chaos is part of the prediction, is part of the formula. Chaos in the European Union, which most certainly is not going to stay together. Germany's not going to pay for Greece forever. And chaos here in the United States, stock market is going to start trading, I think, in October at under 10,000. Would not surprise me at all to see the stock market head back to the 6,000 level.
Wow.
It was in before we had this recent rise. That we're into a double dip recession. And the globalists see this as part of the formula to create chaos, to force people to be willing to accept radical solutions. And the radical solutions will be the end of the dollar, the use of the International Monetary Fund special drawing rights as an alternative to the dollar and the world currency markets for international trade. It's all orchestrated. Now, when you get down to the illegality, I mean, the Fast and Furious, this is rampant, and it goes right to the top of the White House. This is not going on without Obama's knowledge. It's not going on without the administration at the very top approving it. And Alex, anybody who thinks that, you know, billions of dollars of drugs are getting into the United States and law enforcement doesn't know where they are. I mean, the Obama administration has virtually said, we're not going to deport any illegal aliens unless they've already committed a second crime. So you've got ignoring of the laws on a rampant mode going on in the border right now. And the Border Patrol agents will lose their jobs if they too strictly enforce the law. There's a lot of wink, wink. I mean, it's shocking. Sending guns to Mexico, where you think, well, this is insane. And you realize, wait a minute, there may be a larger plan here. You know, there's a lot of drugs coming to the United States, a lot of drugs that could be stopped. There's a lot of guns going to Mexico, guns that we don't have to ship them. I mean, if we really were serious about stopping the Mexico drug cartels, I think we could do it very quickly with adequate military force on the border. We don't intend to stop it because there's too many people making money from it. And the people making money from the drug trade are not limited to the criminals outside of government. That's the shocking reality.
Well, you're right. I was driving back yesterday, and we heard the report earlier with my family from the beach inside the United States, South Padre, and I came to a checkpoint right at 100 miles from the Mexican border. We showed a Google map earlier, and they have these internal checkpoints where they harass citizens, and they were just going up and putting dogs in people's cars. And they got to me, and I said, no, I'm not going to let you do that. And they backed off, but not until I said, look, you know the government ships guns into Mexico and drugs up here. And I was going to start elaborating. hey, I know the Border Patrol's been told to let in certain shipments from Sinaloa. And the guy just said, okay, fine. He smiled and said, you can go. I mean, look, the game is over. It's a joke. Now, looking at this, I haven't seen in 3+ years of Obama being in office what you were able to do, what you and Joseph Farah were able to do. And the desperateness of Esquire coming out and running a hoax saying you apologized, the book was a fraud, and it was recalled to try to bankrupt you guys, not just at your wholesale, but at retail. And I know there's that big lawsuit, and I want to ask you about that. But if he'll say stage riots in Kenya with his cousin because he didn't get elected, of course he'll stage riots here. And I see them trying to co-opt anger at Wall Street instead of going right at the heart, the big mega banking cartel that is the private Federal Reserve. So briefly speak to the difference between a Main Street bank or the thousands of stocks traded on Wall Street that are legitimate companies versus the insiders who do get the tens of trillions in our bailout money, who are always the same big Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, that I see financing the carbon taxes, financing the police state, financing the move to the governor's councils. I mean, if we're going to protest, quote, Wall Street, what do you see as an effective challenge to it? Then I want to get into the latest on the birth certificate and the new book that's coming out.
Well, first of all, I just want to emphasize that the birth certificate issue is not going away. And Obama knows that we've got him cornered. And in fact, we can prove that the birth certificate that was released is a forgery. And this investigation Sheriff Joe Arpaio is conducting in Maricopa County is a serious law enforcement investigation that the Obama people within the White House are worried about. They understand its implications. I mean, let's take a look at the full situation here. What you've got is Obama's realizing, and the Democratic Party is realizing, Obama cannot be reelected. They're not going to produce jobs. Unemployment. This is not a recession. This is what globalism looks like.
By the way, you and I were saying this a year ago that he might not. Now it's in the Washington Post, the New York Times. They're saying, don't run again. Don't run again. Please continue.
Well, Obama's one choice is don't run again and bring in Hillary and let Hillary come back and, the savior, let the Republicans compete against Hillary. And the Republicans know that's a scenario. They don't want to deal with it. It's why Boehner, the Congress, will not investigate the birth certificate. They don't want to see Obama go. They want to run against Obama. But Obama knows that he's going to be found out. He knows that fraud and felony have been committed here, and birth certificate information has been forged on Obama. We can prove it without any doubt. It's been admitted to.
Well, obviously, they would have just ignored your book and not had a big, giant national announcement. I mean,
Correct.
If your book was baloney, you wouldn't respond to it. I mean, you have the President of the United States involved in an elaborate press conferences and releases and biggest story in the country, and then you get the thing, and it looks like my 8-year-old son made it.
Well, and take a look at where's the birth certificate book. It's got 125 exhibits in it. I've been researching Obama since 2006, and the White House knows very well that when I'm researching and investigating something, it's solid. You can look at the documentary evidence yourself. It's right in the book. Now, the choice Obama's going to have is pull out and let Hillary come in, and the Obama people are going to play out the chaos card. They're going to say, maybe we can cause enough chaos that, in fact, we can cancel the election. We can convince the American people it's not the time to transition power. And the White House is going to think about seriously having a national emergency or race riots or class riots, anything that can cause chaos.
So they're thinking about a Roosevelt-type move. They've got the Super Congress in place. They've got the Governor's Council in place. And they're trial ballooning it everywhere.